think John Coltrane was a person with a lot of emotion inside. It's like very, very much a volcano that erupted internally, except when he played. I think there are qualities in Coltrane's music which are very, very human, personal qualities. There's a great spirituality, there's a great kindness, a dedication sometimes bordering on obsession.
In all aspects of his life, whether it was music or whether it was religion or whether it was drugs or drink, he was a totally, you know, a very obsessive person.
I just think it was tragic that, you know, he died so young because of, you know, the kind of life he lived before he really got completely self-conscious and understood what he wanted to do. I think he was searching, like all of us.
Starting in 1945, John Coltrane's career spanned the most vibrant years of modern jazz. His most influential period began when he set up his own group in 1960. The way he played is still admired today, a way of blowing saxophone with a human quality.
I think he was trying to get more in contact with the human voice, you know, because a lot of times it's referred to as, you know, more of a scream or a cry, you know. What he was doing, like in the early 60s, he really started to change the sound of the instrument. Journalists and critics used to think that Coltrane was very angry because he always sounded so hard and, you know, like sort of you know, he'd play like really with a lot of energy and fire in the music. And when they spoke to him, he was one of the gentlest man that, you know, they could ever have interviewed, you know, so I guess it's just the sound that he had in his head, and he tried to get it out.
Delving into himself, Coltrane fed a range of emotions in his music. An incident in Birmingham, Alabama inspired him to write one of his most powerful compositions. On September 15th, 1963, the white Ku Klux Klan bombed a Sunday school, killing 4 young black girls. Coltrane's response was, Alabama.
Now, even if you don't know that that came out of the killing of those girls by the Klan, you know, in that bombing, when you hear that, that is such a deeply sad, reaching piece that it will make you feel that even if you don't know the specifics of it. See, that's what art does. It will make you feel that sadness.
Coltrane developed his art playing clubs, at first in Philadelphia and then in New York, where he arrived at the end of the 1940s. New York clubs were hotbeds for jazz experimentation. On stage, Coltrane learned the technique of using popular songs as a framework for improvisation.
In jazz, a song is just a suggestion, because in jazz, so much of what you put into a song is improvisation. And improvisation is playing at the spur of the moment, you know, playing what you feel at the moment. So a jazz musician can play a song over and over and over again and still find inspiration based on the moment, and communicate that inspiration with that song. You know, Coltrane playing My Favorite Things. This is a song which he played over and over and over again. But the song, the composition, My Favorite Things, was just a suggestion. It was just kind of a emotional territory from which he could, you know, he could branch off and explore and communicate something different with that song night after night after night.
My Favorite Things was sung by Julie Andrews in the popular film, The Sound of Music. Andrews played a nun, somewhat different from the image of a jazz musician.
Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things.
I think my favorite things, as corny as people may think it is as a song, it's a beautiful melody and a beautiful harmony to go along with that melody. And, you know, right there, that's material for a jazz musician to work with and to mold into his or her own vision.
I think he saw the inherent beauty in the actual motifs of the tune, that opening. When you take it out of its context of the, you know, the show and the movie and this big sort of show tune, it's actually a really haunting, sad melody line. And I think he went for that. He went straight to the melody line and said, this is an amazingly beautiful melody line. And basically what he did with the rest of the tune was he stripped out all the unnecessary parts of it and, you know, he completely simplified it. And I think that's where its beauty is.
My Favorite Things was the first recording on which Coltrane used the soprano sax. The soprano had been forgotten in post-war modern jazz. This is ironic because it was played by the man credited as the first serious jazz sax player, Sidney Bechet. Coltrane rediscovered the instrument in his search to find tones he could not reach with his tenor.
Well, for example, like the track My Favorite Things, I mean, you can play it on tenor. It will sound a little like this, though. Which is fine, but when he played it on soprano, I think he did it for a reason, because there's a much more lyrical, plaintive, almost haunting sound to the soprano, which, in a sense, suits the melody, it serves the melody line much better.
The saxophone was invented by Adolphe Sax in 1846. Sax devised the correct way to finger keys to make notes. Coltrane didn't want to be confined to formulas and explored ways to express more with his saxophone. One technique was false fingering.
False fingering is another way to finger a certain pitch or a certain note on the saxophone. There's usually one correct way to finger that note. For a middle C on the saxophone, that's the correct fingering. It presents the note in the kind of purest, most natural way. But there's other fingerings that will create the same note, but with a different texture or different tonal quality. You might not be able to tell the difference there, but if I play the two fingerings, the real and the false, back to back, you'll hear the difference. And I think the key is to try to use it musically. I mean, it's easy to learn the fingerings, but to try to create something musically is a whole other matter.
Coltrane went further than finding new ways to play the saxophone. He changed parts of the instrument itself. Inside the mouthpiece is a reed, which vibrates when the musician blows. The thickness of the reed shapes the tonal quality of the saxophone. This thickness can be adjusted by clipping or shaving the reed. Coltrane was obsessed to find the right thickness. Like other sax players, he would even grind down the metal of the mouthpiece itself.
When it gets to the point of taking minutest particles of metal out of it, it can be very crucial. For example, if you take too much metal from the tip, you will completely damage the sound. You won't be able to get a sound at all out of the mouthpiece. So it's really, really minute measurements And it's a really fine edge. You can take a mouthpiece to the point where you just take the tiniest scraping off it and you will ruin the mouthpiece completely. It will be unplayable. It happened to Coltrane on a couple of occasions, I believe. Right before he made the Crescent album, he was completely happy with the mouthpiece he had, but he still wanted that little extra thing from it, and then he completely damaged the mouthpiece. And so just before Crescent was made, he was playing on a completely new mouthpiece, which by all accounts he was dissatisfied with, yet he managed to produce a beautiful sound out of it.
The mouthpiece makes a difference, but it's a technical difference. It's not an emotional difference. Ultimately, your sound is not about this or your fingers or anything physical. It's about what you hear and what you feel. Your sound is your soul. So if you truly have a connection with yourself, then you're going to achieve your sound on any instrument and any, any mouthpiece, any reed. I mean, for as much as Coltrane changed mouthpieces and carved out mouthpieces and messed with them and had, garbage bags full of mouthpieces, the story goes. For as much as he was obsessive about it, he always had his sound. No matter what mouthpiece Coltrane is playing, it's him because his sound was his soul and his emotion.
But Coltrane's search for his sound took him to the darkest places. Like many other jazz musicians of the 40s and 50s, he tried anything to find inspiration. What he used was dangerous, but powerful.
Each guy chooses his own way. At that time, especially, there was a lot of that going on. I managed to avoid most of that, but there were times when I liked to smoke marijuana, and suddenly I'm totally immersed, like a door opens up. Thing is that if you play very inspired that way, if it's recorded and you listen the next day, you have to get stoned to listen to it too.
Decades before the excesses of rock and roll bands, jazz musicians were taking drugs. Black neighborhoods were actually targeted by white drug pushers, including the late-night world of jazz clubs. In the 1940s, Coltrane became a heroin user. Sometimes drug-taking was the only way to become part of a group.
I never really had that problem, but I know that existed. People that were taking the drugs wanted to hire people so that we'd be available. If they didn't have any, the drummer would have some or whatever.
Drugs took their toll on jazz musicians, and many died young. Drugs almost destroyed Coltrane's career until in 1957, he kicked the habit. He stopped drinking, turned vegetarian, and studied Eastern religion. In the early 60s, this spiritualism was in tune with a younger audience.
Coltrane benefited from the Woodstock attitude. You had an audience there prepared philosophically for something different, something new, something that struck them as being anti-establishment. That helped to make him the great seller that he was. He was making a lot of money and selling a lot of records in jazz terms.
But all the money that Coltrane earned during the 60s was not enough to buy him the one thing he didn't have: time. In the early 1960s, there was a big difference between recorded music and playing live. Recorded tunes were limited to 3 minutes. Live, John Coltrane was known to have played non-stop for 2 hours.
You get into a state of meditation, a sort of a meditative state, where time just flies. You don't know that you've been playing for 2 hours. And I think that's what he must have felt. It's like, wow, 2 hours must have seemed like 2 minutes.
Well, the thing is, he used to practice personally on the instrument himself between 12 and 14 hours a day, you know, so he used to pass out from exhaustion from just practicing all day. So 2 hours was nothing to him. He could play one song for 2 hours, you know.
In October 1961, Coltrane headlined at the Village Vanguard, one of the oldest jazz clubs in New York. The reaction was extreme. On one occasion, a waitress was seen holding her ears screaming, "I can't stand it anymore." His experiments simply didn't fit the club environment.
I think it's difficult because then it's frustrating for the club owners because they like to sell drinks, and if the audience is all totally wrapped up in the music for 2 hours at a stretch, then the rate at which they buy drinks drops off. Everybody knows that. So it didn't fit in the club situation, it didn't fit in the concert situation, but he was nevertheless driven to break those rules and to be difficult in that way.
Coltrane was one of the first to push time limits of tunes on his long players or LPs. These limits had been set in the 1920s when recordings were cut onto 10-inch records. These discs only allowed for around 3 minutes of recording. In 1948, Columbia introduced the 12-inch LP, which allowed 30 minutes of music. They were mastered on magnetic tape and meant that musicians could play for much longer. Technology allowed the players to be more self-indulgent.
Tape and the LP together created an opportunity for people to stretch out. It also made a lot of people lose that discipline of saying what you have to say in a chorus or two choruses, which is not to say, and I really don't want to go on record, that there's not a lot of truly amazing 10 and 20-minute performances, but there's also a lot of extremely boring ones, too.
For the jazz soloist, it is my view that only the very greatest jazz musicians can sustain a solo for more than a minute or so. After that time, they're simply repeating themselves. They're flailing, they're flapping their fingers. Not true of a Coltrane, not true of a Charlie Parker, not true of a Bix Beiderbecke, the great ones. They can sustain it for longer, but that's very rare. The problem with the LP is that it allowed everybody to just go on soloing for five minutes at a stretch, no thought to structure, no thought to organizing the material in some sensible way. It's just bang away and bang away and bang away. And I think that really that 3-minute form had a lot of values because it contained you.
Coltrane's music couldn't be further from the 3-minute form. He no longer based his explorations on recognizable song structures. The music alienated many jazz lovers and scared off the record business. The style has been called free jazz.
I guess improvisation is spontaneous melodies being made up all the time, but over a given structure. So you have to work within the constrictions of the chord sequence. And with free music, what they did was they took away the chord sequence as well. So they improvise in melodies and improvise in a structure as well as you go along, So it's spontaneous composition, totally.
You have to keep the music fresh. The sound of surprise, as one of the writers talked about it. So when jazz is no longer surprising, then perhaps it's no longer jazz. If you're always looking for something to be fresh and hopefully have something new about it, then you will try all kinds of possibilities.
Dropping structures was an attempt to make the music simpler, but music without structure put up new barriers.
The barriers, well, attracting an audience might be a barrier because, you still got to eat, you still got to live, and for free music, it's a minority, very small minority. Even though jazz is a minority music overall, free music is even more so, so you don't have much of an audience, and there's a running joke that within musicians that when you talk about free music, you ask, oh, you mean you don't want to get paid? It's free.
In the end, it's all labels and terminologies which don't bear very close inspection. It's as free as it is. Once it's been played, it's fixed and it's gone anyway, unless it was recorded, in which case it's a recording, and the next time it gets played, it won't be the same. So there's a philosophy, there's a degree of emotional involvement and a sense of time and place which are very important. And moving on with the times, as your life moves on, as your experiences develop, and trying to reflect what you've learned back into the music, put that back into the music, have the music grow and develop as you grow and develop.
Today, Coltrane's influence can be heard in the free jazz movement. His music was anchored in rhythms supplied by his drummer, Elvin Jones.
He'll play a pattern like this. And yet, what he's doing is just opening everything up. So there's so much air in between the notes that you think, hey, Jesus, he doesn't know where he is, you know? The key is this. This is always doing that. And if anybody knows Elvin, whenever he's watching any of the younger players play, he'll always look at you and go, that's the key. This keeps the time. Everything else flows around the hi-hat. The way I kind of hear Elvin Jones's drumming, and also the way Elvin Jones's drumming worked in tandem with McCoy Tyner's piano playing, is this almost wave effect. I felt that they were creating this wave of rhythm and harmony that Coltrane could kind of ride the crest of. That's the imagery that makes the most sense to me.
It was quite extraordinary. It was truly, in a sense, heavy metal jazz. I mean, it was really in your face, and they really thought together. It truly was a remarkable group that just came together at a certain point in time on this world, and we should all forever be grateful.
But time finally got the better of him. In 1965, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. John Coltrane died 2 years later. He was 41 years old.